Oshi no Ko has faced some backlash. It was to my surprise when I found out, since I thought it was the darling anime of the season for many. As I watched the 6th episode, I couldn't help but think, what did they do to make people this mad? Was it some sort of shock value gimmick or grotesque thing? And yet I couldn't find a single fault that someone reasonable would take to the internet with. So I decided against the viewpoint expressed in the anime and put on my investigator hat, or as the show calls it, ego surf, to understand the backlash. It's so ironic that the critique of the episode became the exact thing depicted. The critics became what they sought to destroy. Were people too captivated by the animation or the bright colors on screen to pay attention to the messages? It's showing you that the harmful comments and responses of anonymous people can tear someone down and cause them to have an extreme negative reaction. Akane doesn't decide to try and take her life off a whim. It's slowly being broken down as a human until the only reasonable escape in her mind is death. We can't forget that if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. This line from the anime really stood out for me since it's alluding to the term Call of the Void, or L'appel du vide, which is intrusive thoughts, suicidal ideation, or the urge to engage in destructive behaviors during daily life. The argument against showing or telling stories with sensitive content cycles back and will continue until the end of time, and is a narrative I'll oppose for the rest of my days. Many writers or mangakas you could name crafted stories to explore complex themes or an idea they wanted the answer to. H.P. Lovecraft wasn't writing because it made him financially stable. It was to cope with being terrified of everything life has to offer, and created some of the scariest monsters we've seen in literature. Frank Herbert's Dune Saga explores many themes, with a very apparent one being concerns with leadership, because he himself was critical of government and what they should or should not be able to do. We can say that these people shouldn't get inspiration from traumatic experiences like some speculate Akasaka did with the tragedy of Hana Kimura. However, are we not all influenced by our surroundings in some way, take inspiration from our upbringing or fictional characters? Even if in this specific instance it was the case with Akasaka, could it be pinpointed as a conscious decision, or was he influenced subconsciously by briefly seeing it on the news, or even yet convinced himself it was his own idea? We can speculate as long as we want, or even be critical of how people use sensitive subjects, but the message of episode 6 remains a reality. People are far too comfortable tearing others down on the internet. In fact, it's too easy. You don't have to confront them in person and risk provoking a physical reaction. You don't have to see the person's face as you tear them down, and you don't have to be an individual doing it. Maybe we wouldn't need such a jarring wake-up call on these painful topics if we were responsive to other methods trying to educate us around these topics. The backlash shows the necessity when people resort to mob mentality, the inclination to be part of a large group, often neglecting their individual feelings in the process and adopting the behaviors and actions of the people around them. At the end of the day, Oshi no Ko isn't about telling a happy story. It's a commentary on the grim reality of the entertainment industry. There's an interview with Akasaka where he states, "I want people to know how young talents are being hurt, exploited, and suffering. I think that this work also asks the question of how people should deal with and treat those talents."